I died in the agony of being devoured amid the freezing rain, only to awaken again in the stifling heat of June. Welcome to Panda Storyboard. Put on your headphones, get cozy, and settle in. Let's enjoy this story together. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Now, let's begin. The moment my consciousness returned, the bone-piercing cold and the pain of flesh being torn apart still felt carved into my soul. I could almost smell the nauseating stench of blood and hear former companions fighting over the last scraps of my flesh. Their greedy howls mixed with Lily's desperate cries. "Big sister, save me." I shot upright in bed, heart pounding wildly, cold sweat instantly soaking my thin pajamas. But before me was the familiar ceiling of my shabby little apartment. Outside lay the quiet darkness of night. The old air conditioner wheezed one last time before finally dying, leaving only heat and sticky sweat behind. Yet, what lingered deep in my bones was still the freezing cold of my previous death. I was back. Stiffly, I turned my head and looked around the cramped but temporarily safe room. This wasn't a dying hallucination. On the desk sat a photo of my sister Lily and me smiling brightly. Tomorrow's work clothes lay folded at the bed's corner. Everything had returned to the night before the extreme cold disaster began. I had already died once. In that frozen hell, hunger and cold eventually stripped me of all resistance. But what terrified me most was never the temperature. It was the boundless malice humans unleashed to survive. They ate me alive. There were no zombies in the apocalypse, but it turned people into something even worse. I threw off the blanket, rushed to the window, and yanked open the curtains. Outside, the old residential block lay quiet under scattered streetlights. It seemed peaceful. But I knew that in just a few months, when the global deep freeze arrived, this place would become hell. Supplies would vanish. Order would collapse. Humanity would rot. Cannibalism would no longer be fiction. I gripped the windowsill so tightly, my nails nearly dug into the wood. Fear coiled around my heart like an icy snake. But then a stronger emotion surged up. Relief. Ecstasy. A fierce determination to seize this second chance. In this life, I, Anna, would never repeat the same tragedy. My sister and I would never become someone else's food again. I wiped away tears without realizing when they'd fallen, my gaze turning firm. I shut the window tightly, as if sealing away the nightmares and weakness of my previous life. Back at my bedside, I picked up my phone. June 19th. Nearly half a year remained before the June snowfall that marked the beginning of catastrophe. Time was now my greatest asset. Sleep was impossible. I opened my banking app and began calculating everything I had: insurance compensation for my parents' accident, years of savings, side income, altogether nearly 1 million yuan. Not much in this city, but vital as startup capital. The truly valuable asset, however, was the aging apartment my sister and I lived in. With redevelopment rumors spreading, prices were rising. In my previous life, we hesitated to sell, hoping prices would climb further. Instead, the apocalypse arrived. Memory surged. Thomas, who led neighbors to storm our home and steal our food before imprisoning us. The friendly couple next door, who stole other supplies early on and vanished. Smart but cold. We couldn't stay here. We had to sell quickly, leave this crowded place, and find somewhere remote to build a secure shelter. The idea took root instantly. A scratching sound came from outside the bedroom door, followed by a familiar whine. I opened the door. A golden retriever stood there, tail wagging wildly, holding a carton of milk in its mouth. Benny. My voice choked as I knelt and hugged him tightly. He always knew when I felt bad and would bring milk to comfort me. In my previous life, he stood in front of me at the end, barking at those monsters trying to protect me. Burying my face in his fur, I drew warmth from what I'd regained. In that cruel world, only he and my sister were my remaining light. "It's okay now," I whispered. We'll all live well this time. After calming Benny, I sat at my desk and began searching property listings, then quickly closed the page. Not buying in town, even the strongest building would be targeted. I needed somewhere hidden and defensible. My thoughts drifted to our rural hometown. Grandpa once leased barren hills for farming. Halfway up the mountain stood an abandoned warehouse carved into the rock-solid reinforced concrete. And the current leaseholder was my aunt, Shen Yume. By dawn, I had fully calmed down and formed a preliminary plan. Though sleepless, I felt more energized than ever. I cooked breakfast, the sizzling eggs and porridge creating an illusion of normal warmth. At breakfast, Lily noticed real estate pages on my tablet. "Sis, why are you looking at houses? Did we get rich?" She hugged my arm excitedly, saying she liked lively neighborhoods with lots of people. Unsafe. I stayed calm and tapped her forehead lightly. Adults' business. Eat. But her words gave me a clearer idea. Thick earth layers for insulation, high locations, away from crowds. That was exactly what I needed. After sending her back to her room, I confirmed my savings again, changed clothes, and prepared to leave. Opening the door, I encountered the smiling couple next door, the same people who'd stolen supplies and fled in my previous life. I forced a polite greeting and left quickly, heading to a neighbor who actively encouraged selling homes. In my last life, they sold early and escaped safely. This time, I wouldn't miss the chance. They welcomed me enthusiastically and added me to a WeChat group focused on rising property values. Seeing lively discussions, I finally relaxed. Selling the apartment was the crucial first step. Time was running out. Walking home under the morning sun, I felt no warmth, only urgency. I hadn't come back to mourn the past. I came back to change fate. The apartment sold surprisingly quickly. A buyer offered full payment and wanted a rapid handover without moving in, which suited me perfectly. Within a week, everything was finalized. On handover day, I gave one last look at the apartment that held both memories and my previous death. 2 cameras by the door remained at the buyer's request, perhaps useful someday. Without hesitation, I left with Lily, Benny, and our minimal luggage, abandoning the city that would soon become hell. The countryside air smelled fresh with soil and grass. Aunt Shen Yume was shocked to see us so soon after the new year. Lily happily hugged her, while I explained we'd stay for a while. Aunt soon sensed something serious and questioned me. I decided to tell part of the truth. Direct talk of rebirth and apocalypse would only make me sound insane. Instead, I spoke of unusual climate signs and possible extreme cold later in the year, even snowfall in June. I mentioned abnormal animal behavior on her farm. Her expression gradually turned serious. She showed me videos she'd recorded, chickens and rabbits behaving exactly as I described. Finally, she agreed. I could use the mountain warehouse, but publicly it would only be for storage. If disaster didn't come, trouble must be avoided. I understood immediately. Her trust mattered more than money. After reaching agreement, I wasted no time, leaving Lily still thinking this was just a vacation. With Aunt, preparations for survival truly began. I immediately grabbed my measuring tools and headed to the warehouse halfway up the mountain. It was even larger than I remembered, with most of the storage space carved into the mountainside. The thick, reinforced concrete structure gave off a reassuring sense of security. It had decent ventilation because it used to store timber, with basic ventilation windows, but I knew that was far from sufficient. In the following days, I worked like a wound spring. Using plans to convert the space into a studio and emergency shelter as an excuse, I hired a reliable construction crew. Just as expected, one foreman tried to take advantage of me, assuming that as a young woman eager to finish quickly, I'd accept inflated prices. He complained that reinforcement work and upgrading ventilation systems were expensive. I had anticipated this. Calmly, I offered a price slightly above market rate, but entirely reasonable, then listed current prices for key materials and estimated labor costs. Finally, I said lightly, "Foreman Wang, I know the market. This price is fair. If you can't do it, I'll ask the other team in town. They just finished a project and should be available." He clearly didn't expect me to know so much. After a moment of awkwardness, he quickly agreed. The small conflict was resolved easily. Having information and staying composed gave me a satisfying sense of control over my fate after being reborn. We reinforced walls and floors, inspected every structural detail, and ensured absolute safety. Then we upgraded the ventilation system, keeping the original vents while adding electric exhaust fans and spare filters, ensuring we wouldn't suffocate even if snow sealed the entrances. Just these basic upgrades took over a month. During this time, I accurately predicted a brief temperature rebound followed by rapid cooling. When Aunt compared my earlier words with the weather forecast, her attitude shifted from doubt to complete trust. After that, she stopped questioning the renovations and even helped me find more reliable suppliers, driving the family pickup to transport materials. As for stockpiling supplies, Aunt showed a business person's decisiveness. She insisted we move quickly before others noticed abnormal temperatures and began hoarding. Under the cover of warehouse renovations, we began large-scale purchases: flour, grains, oil, canned goods, compressed biscuits, dehydrated vegetables. Truckload after truckload moved to another concealed warehouse under Aunt's name. To vary our meals, I bought hundreds of boxes of instant noodles and cleared out multiple stores' stock of self-heating hot pots and heating packs. Not only were they convenient, but in emergencies, the heat they produced could save lives. For meat, Aunt said the farm already had plenty of chickens and rabbits. We could move live animals into the warehouse later. We only purchased some beef, lamb, and pork for early consumption. We didn't buy much bottled water, only about 200 barrels and several large storage tanks, since, according to my memories, endless snowfall would later provide abundant water. Purification equipment mattered more, so I bought multiple water purifiers and large quantities of filters. Electricity was the lifeline. Diesel generators, pedal-powered generators, and large battery banks became standard equipment. I also ordered a household wind turbine online. The relentless cold winds would need to be put to use. All exposed wiring was wrapped in thick insulation and buried underground. Cold weather supplies were critical. Energy-efficient heaters, electric blankets, down jackets, heavy quilts, military coats, thermal underwear, all purchased in bulk at wholesale markets. We even planned to push several beds together to share warmth. Supplies for Benny, our dog, were also stocked. Food, snacks, toys, though he'd grown unusually restless, often scratching the ground or hiding nervously. Animals, I realized, sense disasters before humans. By early April, with renovations finished and core supplies stored, social media was already buzzing with phrases like, "This year is so cold," and "Spring failed." Videos of people hoarding supplies were mocked online, but both Aunt and I knew urgency was growing. As predicted, online sentiment shifted. Hoarding videos gained attention, and although many still mocked them, some people began noticing food selling faster in stores. Aunt worried that more people were waking up. Competition for supplies would intensify, so we needed to secure the final key materials quickly, especially medicine. Large purchases could now attract attention. I decided to go alone to avoid suspicion. At wholesale markets, the atmosphere had changed. Workers were busier, some items were already out of stock, and prices were rising. I moved quickly, purchasing compressed rations, vitamins, hydroponic equipment for indoor vegetables, and, most importantly, emergency medicines, fever reducers, anti-inflammatories, wound supplies, frostbite ointment, even some prescription drugs through connections. While loading the truck, a man approached, offering a cigarette and asking if I was opening a supermarket. Alarm bells rang. I declined and pretended I was just purchasing goods for a village shop. He seemed suspicious, especially noticing the medicine. I left quickly, but in the mirror it looked like he was memorizing my license plate. The sense of being watched confirmed our peaceful days were ending. By late May, every corner of the warehouse was fully utilized. Food zones, supply areas, living spaces, and even areas for Benny and future livestock. Generators were tested, batteries charged. The cave warehouse had become a fully functional fortress. Most people still lived normally, dismissing strange weather as gossip, but I knew calm before the storm when I saw it. Soon after, Aunt and I pulled my cousin and sister out of school under the excuse of family matters. Meanwhile, trouble brewed in my old neighborhood group chat. Two men fought publicly over a relationship scandal triggered by leaked photos. Watching their conflict unfold, I felt slightly relieved. Planting discord might delay their future alliance. In early June, heat rose unnaturally. Asphalt shimmered, insects screamed. I repeatedly checked preparations while Benny grew increasingly anxious. Even the animals at Aunt's farm seemed lethargic. A storm was coming. In the early hours of June 9th, I woke to suffocating heat. The sky outside was an eerie yellow. Then, after temperatures peaked, they plummeted sharply. Cold air poured through ventilation ducts. At the observation window, I saw people who'd been wearing short sleeves suddenly shivering, scrambling for coats. Rain began to fall, but it froze midair. Snow. In June, large snowflakes drifted down absurdly against summer greenery, hissing on hot ground as they accumulated. My phone vibrated endlessly. Social media must have exploded with topics like June snow and global cooling. Aunt arrived with the girls, all bundled in coats, faces full of shock. I slammed the reinforced door shut, sealing out chaos and cold. Inside, heaters hummed, lights glowed softly. Compared to the world outside, this place felt like a warm island. Finally, I told them the truth. "This isn't normal snow," I said. "This is a global extreme cold disaster, the beginning of the end." Snow fell silently, burying mountains, rivers, and the noise of civilization. Our ark had already set sail across the frozen wasteland, but safety would only be temporary. The true trials had just begun. Trish's eyes widened, her expression caught between disbelief and something she couldn't quite process. Lily's face turned pale, and she instinctively grabbed my arm. "Sis, you already knew, didn't you? That's why you sold the apartment, brought me here, and prepared all this." Her voice trembled. "Yes," I admitted calmly, glancing at Aunt. "Aunt and I noticed the signs a long time ago. We didn't tell you because we didn't want you to worry, and because word getting out could bring unnecessary trouble." Aunt spoke up at the right moment, her voice steady and authoritative. "What Anna says is true. You've both seen the strange behavior at the farm. And look outside. Snow in this season? Is that normal?" She pointed at the cages of chickens and rabbits we'd moved into the warehouse. Animals that once roamed freely in the mountains now huddled in corners, trembling and making uneasy noises. Some rabbits had even pulled patches of fur from their own bellies from stress. Even Benny behaved differently, staying pressed against my leg instead of playing with his new toys, ears alert and eyes scanning anxiously. Nothing spoke louder than this living evidence. Trish opened her mouth as if to speak, but eventually lowered her head in silence. Lily hugged me tightly and buried her face in my shoulder. "Sis, you've worked so hard." At that moment, the last weight on my heart finally fell away. Our core group had reached consensus. After the initial shock and fear, life inside the shelter gradually settled into a strange rhythm. Outside, temperatures stabilized around -50 degrees Celsius and continued falling slowly. Inside, thanks to thick walls and insulation, heaters and body warmth barely kept temperatures above freezing, though heavy clothing was still necessary. Soon, our first internal crisis struck. The ventilation duct became blocked by snow. One morning, the air felt stuffy, and the ventilation fan sounded strained. When I checked the duct inspection point, my heart sank. The outer mesh and much of the duct were clogged with solid frozen snow. It must be cleared immediately, I decided. Otherwise, carbon dioxide levels will rise and will suffocate. Going outside was extremely dangerous. A few minutes exposure could cause severe frostbite. Fully layered in winter gear, hand warmers plastered everywhere, Aunt and I pushed open the door. It was like opening a massive freezer. The cold sliced through our clothes like knives. Outside was a white, hell-howling wind, flying ice shards, near zero visibility. All previous paths and markers were buried. The snow had hardened like iron. Each shovel strike barely left a mark. We took turns hacking away, breath freezing on masks and eyelashes. Within minutes, my limbs felt numb, and my fingers burned with piercing pain. At last, we cleared enough for air to pass and staggered back inside. collapsing against the door, covered in frost like snowmen. Feeling returned slowly, followed by burning pain from frostbite. The lesson was clear. Clearing ventilation would have to become a regular, critical task. Survival wasn't just hiding. Life continued between anxiety and fragile stability. We established strict schedules to monitor temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide levels, track supplies, and generate electricity using pedal-powered machines. Sweating on treadmills or bicycles became both exercise and power production. The internet and electricity flickered on and off. Government repair teams kept working, and rescue announcements offered faint hope. Through fragmented online updates, we learned of disasters elsewhere, unprepared southern regions suffering massive casualties, some countries falling into lawless chaos. Yet soldiers, doctors, and volunteers continued risking their lives to restore power and deliver aid. To ease psychological strain, we tried to maintain a sense of normal life, cooking hot meals on portable stoves, watching downloaded movies, studying courses. Under Aunt's insistence, Lily and Trish even had to complete homework. But outside threats eventually reached us, not violent mobs, but lingering ghosts from the past. One day, Aunt's phone suddenly filled with messages from her blocked ex-husband. At first, he played the victim, describing his suffering and begging to see his daughter one last time. Aunt ignored it, but Trish spoke coldly. He was likely broke again or starving, trying to exploit them. Soon his tone shifted to threats. He claimed to be at Aunt's old house, sending photos, one showing the abandoned home, another showing his frostbitten hand gripping a machete pointed at the door. "If I can't live, neither will you." Fear spread through the room. Though he couldn't find the warehouse, he knew where Aunt came from. Aunt shut off her phone firmly. "No matter what he says or does, even if he dies outside, it's not our responsibility." Still, tension lingered. Later, through neighbors' videos, we learned he'd broken into the empty house, crying one moment and smashing furniture the next, threatening to burn it down if not told where we were. After that, the atmosphere grew heavier. We checked all ventilation points and walls again. Benny became more vigilant, reacting to every sound. Days passed in caution and waiting. Clearing ventilation became routine, but remained dangerous. Human-powered electricity and careful rationing defined our lives. Online, dark humor appeared. People joking that food shortages mattered less since people were dying faster. Meanwhile, Aunt insisted the girls keep studying. "The apocalypse will end someday," she said. "Then you'll need your brains to survive." So in the frozen wasteland, 2 girls still studied math and memorized English words, their complaints about homework becoming rare sparks of life. I focused on supply management, rationing dwindling fresh food, relying mainly on hydroponic sprouts and limited meat. Benny remained everyone's comfort, sensing and soothing our anxiety. But peace shattered nearly 10 months after the disaster began. While Lily and I pedaled to charge batteries, my backup phone suddenly vibrated with urgent news alerts. The headline made my heart stop. A massive violent incident had erupted in our old district. 2 gangs led by Thomas and Alex had fought over supplies, causing dozens of casualties. I opened the report with trembling fingers. Despite heavy snow coverage and blurred photos, I recognized them instantly. The report stated that internal conflict and power struggles between the 2 factions had caused widespread violence, leaving 42 dead and 62 injured. The case was solved after an anonymous informant provided crucial video evidence. My vision darkened. How could this happen? I had deliberately prevented their alliance. I'd planted seeds of conflict between them. I thought things wouldn't unfold like my previous life, where they united, seized control of the community, and imprisoned us like livestock. Yet, tragedy had come anyway. I thought I had changed fate. But reality answered me with something even bloodier and more brutal. They hadn't united as before. Instead, they split into 2 even more ruthless and unrestrained violent factions. The death toll even exceeded what I knew from my previous life. "Sis, what's wrong?" Lily noticed something was off and hurried to support me. Aunt and Trish also gathered around. When they saw the news on my phone, they all gasped. "Isn't this the neighborhood we used to live in?" Lily's voice trembled with fear. Aunt looked at me gravely. Anna, is this what you warned about before? I nodded weakly, my throat blocked, unable to speak. A chill spread from my spine to the top of my head, colder than the -50 degrees outside. I had thought that being reborn made me a prophet, that with foreknowledge I could change everything. I believed the photo I released had severed the roots of tragedy. But now I understood. Maybe I had changed the process, but I hadn't changed the inevitability of human corruption under desperate circumstances. Worse, perhaps my small push had only accelerated their fall into something darker. I hadn't saved that community. I had only witnessed its destruction in a different form. The long silent property investment group chat suddenly lit up again with notifications. I opened it mechanically. The chat was in chaos. My God, 42 lives in our neighborhood. Terrifying. Good thing I moved out early. Never thought that Alex was so vicious. That Thomas always looked shady anyway. I heard the new owner of one apartment saw everything through the previous owner's hallway cameras, caught them hacking at each other with knives. He nearly fainted before calling the police. Messages scrolled rapidly, filled with relief from those who had escaped and detached commentary from those unaffected. I stared at familiar and unfamiliar profile pictures, imagining neighbors who never left or couldn't leave, dying amid despair and violence. I had underestimated the darkness in human nature. I thought I had cut off the vine, never realizing the roots were already rotten, blooming into even more poisonous flowers. For several days, I moved like a hollow shell. I lost interest in inventory checks. Even when Benny came to nuzzle me, I only stroked his head absent-mindedly. Lily and Trish didn't know the storm raging inside me. They assumed the endless cold and horrific news had depressed me. Lily even found some psychology ebooks somewhere and awkwardly tried to cheer me up. Seeing her worried yet earnest efforts, I forced down the guilt and self-doubt threatening to swallow me whole. No, I couldn't collapse. At least here, in the ark I built with everything I had, the people I cared about were safe. Outside, the storm raged on, and beneath the frozen world, the dark currents of human nature surged. What had my rebirth truly changed? And how should I face a future that seemed not better because of me, but possibly worse? Staring at the cold, pale sun beyond the observation window, I felt a deep confusion about the meaning of what lay ahead.